Hi, Sherry. So glad to have you. How are you today?
I'm fabulous. It's wonderful here. We're actually getting some rain, which is a real blessing. So it's a good day.
It is a good day. I can't say that it's a good day when we get rain because we get rain pretty often, but it's a good day when I don't walk outside and feel like I'm walking into a sauna because
Mhm.
we're in the Detroit area and the humidity is so much higher than people would think.
Yes,
So, yeah,
I wouldn't
today
think
is a
that for
very
sure.
comfortable day. Yes.
It's a
So,
good one
Sherry,
here.
before we jump into today's topic, I'm super excited to chat with you. You have some amazing experience in really understanding the brain and brain based leadership. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and kind of what started your passion for this topic?
Yes. So today we get to work with a lot of incredible organizations from different industries, and we'll work with their leadership teams really in depth for a long period of time, long being anywhere from 9 to 12 plus months. And then typically there's a repetition of cohorts that follow that. So we get to really go deep in cultures. And it's interesting because this whole journey started many, many years ago when I wanted to be a college English teacher. And then I became a college English teacher. So I realized that was not exactly filling my soul. And a friend of mine who just happened to be named Sherry as well called me one day, and she was starting a workplace education program at AT&T. And when I took the job, it was mainly so I didn't have to grade another 5 paragraph essay. But little did I know that it would send me in a completely different direction for the rest of my life. And I was working with one particular employee who really struggled to learn. And we started meeting together, and word got out, and our partnership grew into a smaller group. And then that small group grew into a larger group. And I hadn't been working with them very long when I thought, how does the brain learn? Because if I knew
Mm.
this, I could help them so much faster. And this is like mid 90s at this point. And little did I know that that put me straight in the middle of what is now considered the decade of the brain. And so I thought I could just maybe make a couple of calls to some professors and figure out the answer to that. But here I am 30 something years later, still trying to discover the answers. But I think the biggest aha out of all of it is this information. It's much more readily available today. It's not always
Mhm.
applied, even though it's readily available. And it's so
Yeah.
practical, and the truth is that if we can apply even a little bit of it, we can get better results with less effort. So much of the pain and that we're complaining about, we're creating. And if we would just align a little bit better with this amazing piece of technology, we wouldn't have to encounter so many of the challenges that we encounter. And so
Right.
it's just really it's so fun today to get to work with high performing people and high performing organizations who just want to get better. And
Yeah.
that's essentially what we get to get up every single day and do. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
there's so much there. I mean, I think one of the reasons that we have such great conversations is I'm also a former educator, right? And I think anyone who goes into education genuinely wants to help people grow and thrive. That's our goal. If we can help people in our surroundings, whether they're our students, our colleagues, whoever it might be, to become the very best versions of themselves, and we can do that in a way that allows them to feel empowered in that process. I know for
Mhm.
myself, that is the number one goal when I'm doing the work I do,
Yeah.
right? And you
And
talk about the
so
culture in
possible.
organizations,
Mhm.
right? And when what we do at Us Squared is we focus on culture of organizations in a different way. So you're talking about organizational culture. We talk about organizational culture by taking into account people's individual cultures. But what I find
Mm.
so fascinating about your work is you're talking about organizational culture from a professional development strand and from the
Mhm.
lens of how can we make sure that we're providing training and professional development that impacts our employees to ultimately better the organizational culture,
Hmm.
right? So I know you've done a
Absolutely.
lot of research on professional development programs, and I'm sure that the audience would love to hear a little bit about some of those, not only what works, because I think we hear a lot about what works, but what are some of the pitfalls that people might experience or things that we need to be mindful of when we're creating our professional development programs?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's a big investment. It's a big investment of dollars, but it's also a big investment of your energy, and honestly, it's also a big investment of people's hopes and dreams, essentially, because what you're saying is, I'm going to offer you this opportunity to grow and develop. And if we don't offer that in a way that's really going to help them get results, if they don't get results, it's easy for those individuals to take that on personally when in fact they weren't. Similar to education, right? You want to know, have we set them up for the ultimate success and to make that as easy as possible. The other thing that's super important to us is whoever it is that champions development in an organization, whether that's the president or that's your, HR department, they're putting a lot on the line to bring somebody in and entrust them with developing their leaders. And I take
Mhm.
that as almost like a sacred uh, trust relationship. And
Right.
so it's so important. There's so much more to it than just the financial investment. And
Mhm.
most of what I've learned, we've definitely done our own research, but a lot of it has been through trial and error. And
Right.
so I'm thinking back over the years when I started doing what I do independently in 2001. And it was not uncommon in 2001 for you to do some one and done kind of development. And it might be entertaining and people might have a good time and they might walk away with a couple of things. But what you never really saw was that long term sustainable impact. And so over the years, it's been about what's missing, what could we be doing? And even if we get results, how could we be even better? I would say maybe one of the biggest takeaways for me is how long it takes because
Mhm.
a couple of things. It takes a while for behavior change to really stick. And I think the brain takes a lot longer to learn, oftentimes, than we anticipate. And the studies show us that the worst predictors of how long something takes to learn are subject matter experts. They underestimate by as much as 70, 80% how long it's really going to take for concepts
Mm.
to be learned and then to see the application of those. So if we're going to make this investment, we've got to think long term. And we've got to
Right.
realize that a lot of these cultural norms and beliefs didn't happen overnight. They're not going to change overnight. And so
Right.
you really want to start thinking about long term. The other thing that's important about that long term is you want to start thinking about multiple touch points. What are all the ways that we can connect with that each person in a cohort individually and then as a cohort as a whole? So one of the big missing pieces in what I did for so long was the one to one, was
Mm.
coaching and genuine coaching in the way a certified trained coaching methodology. And when we started putting the group component and the one to one component in place, that's where we started seeing exponential impact. And so
Mhm.
you want to think about, how do I grow this community? Because if you've got a leadership team, for example, you do want them to have a common experience and common language. And there's learning that's going to happen within that group that you, as a facilitator, you're not going to have anything to do with. You just got to be a part of it, you got to witness it. So that's
Mhm.
important. But what's also important is that you're taking those concepts confidentially and one to one with individuals so that they can see how they can apply it to their individual situations. So that's been a tremendous game changer. So anyone
Yeah.
bringing that in, I would definitely be thinking long term, and I would be thinking, how am I leveraging what happens in the community of learners, but how am I connecting with each person individually?
Yeah,
That
I
would
love
be
that. And you brought up a
super
couple
important.
points of right. I mean, you brought up a couple points of being a certified coach, right? And I know for myself with some of those pieces, there are a lot of people who call themselves DEI consultants, right? And I myself am also a certified coach. That was actually one of the first conversations we had when we were talking about how difficult it is in today's world because so many people put give themselves titles like coach
Mhm.
or mentor or facilitator without understanding what that really means and taking that responsibility seriously, right? And I remember thinking when I got into this work, because I've been doing social justice work for 27 years now. And it was way before it became a thing, right? It was something that I was passionate about, but it was the cultural component. It was cultural competency, cultural awareness, but something between 8 and 10 years ago, I got my coaching certification. And then we created our certification for social justice work. But I think so often we take out the need for that individual piece because we think of professional development as a large training. And we just talked about this before in a conversation I was having with one of my sessions of professional development needs to focus on the development. If
Mhm.
you are simply training,
Mhm. Good
then
point.
you are in a lecture series, right? Think back to college. Did you attend a class that had the word lecture in it? Or did you attend a class that had the word practicum in it? Right? What are we actually providing? So I love that you talk about professional development being true development, where there is both the mass, the large group component, and the individual coaching component so that we can see real actionable steps.
And it elevates the skill set required of a facilitator, of a designer, and of a coach. If it's development at the individual and the group level, there is no cookie cutter. It has to be tailored to the vision of that organization and the values that they want, to live out. But every cohort is going to be different. And even though probably similar, we come in with a general framework and a roadmap, it's never going to look the same way twice because you're dealing with people who are in
No.
different places, experiencing different challenges, and in different organizations with different cultural values. So, really important that it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering when you're doing this work and as you're growing and as you're working with more organizations, are there some kind of look fors that you look for when you're bringing on a new client? I know for ourselves, we have criteria that we will not take every client who wants to work with us because they just might not be ready for our work or they might not be the right at the right stage, right? What are some of your look fors when you're looking for clients?
Such a great question. And it's a question that I wish I had known to ask earlier. I will
Right.
say one thing that immediately is important to us is if we find ourselves trying to convince you that developing your people is important, you're not our person. So
Mhm.
I always kind of think about if you're explaining, you're losing. The other thing is if we can't go in and go all in and know that what we've put in, if we can't offer the right solution, one of our mantras around here is I'd rather get a no for offering the right solution than a yes for offering the wrong solution. So we're not going
I
to
love that.
compromise because what happens is if you don't get the results, that organization's not going to say, "Oh, well, we weren't able to set it up successfully." It's always going to come back on the group that said yes to it. In fact, I think
Mhm.
there's an integrity issue there. If you say yes to something that you know is not going to get people results,
Mhm.
then you're not in integrity with what you're called to do. So those are
Absolutely.
key. It's an organization that values its people and they see how relationships drive results.
Now, I love that you have the number 7. We also have 7 core principles here at Us Squared, and it is very important for us, and we our core principles guide our work, right? And you talk about the 7 foundational principles that you look at in brain-based leadership in your book. Can you do a just a quick rundown? Like, is it an acronym? Is it how do we know what those 7 principles are?
Well, it is an acronym. And
I
as
knew it
we
because fellow educators, nothing has credibility unless it's an acronym. How did I know?
know, I've sometimes said I think consultants get paid by the acronym and the template, but
There you
an
go.
acronym and a template is so aligned with how the brain works too. So why not?
Yep.
So it spells the word cranium, and C is challenge. Maybe the most important thing. If I had one message to share with the world, it would be that the greatest one thing we could do is actively build trust and actively minimize threat, and
Okay.
get some
Yeah.
strategies on how do you reframe threat as a challenge. So C is challenge. We spend a lot of time there. R is relevance, and it's essentially leading with vision and values. The A is action, because what I want to communicate is while our brains do a lot of amazing things for us, clearly, has incredible limitations. In other
Mhm.
words, right, your thoughts lie and you don't have to believe every one of them. And having some
Mhm.
strategies on think about bias. I mean, my goodness, our brains have some severe limitations that we need to be super aware of, and how those limitations may be actually limiting our results. Novelty is innovation, and it's an interesting concept because our brains kind of resist innovation because it's new and different and uncertain, and yet it's exactly what we need if we want to continue to thrive and grow. We couple that with our eye and cranium, which is interaction, because innovation cannot exist in isolation. Innovation happens only when you get diverse perspectives involved and a place where people can share those different perspectives. We can't produce anything great unless we really value all those different perspectives, regardless of all the backgrounds, that we bring. And even we were doing a session this morning, even, it doesn't matter how many years you've been in the industry, what the initials are behind your name, what your title is on the org chart, but how are we truly leveraging interaction? U is using emotion, and that's foundational emotional intelligence. The one thing we will never graduate from. And then finally is, what we call multiple intelligences in the cranium model, but it is the ultimate, which is how do you truly create an inclusive, collaborative culture that values all of our differences and all of our similarities, which is the most sophisticated thing I think we will ever
Right.
do. And
Right.
if you've been fortunate enough to be in organizations and on teams where that magic happens,
Mhm.
it's surreal. And,
Yeah.
with everything all the changes and all the noise and all the distractions, I think it gets more and more and more challenging to remember that if we could just create cultures really of love, like I've got you, of support, what might be possible? That we don't have to be the best in the world, but what if our mission was to be the best for the world? What if we
Love
really
that.
focused on those things. And so it gets, many layers of those 7 principles, but
Yeah.
it's the core of everything that we do.
I mean, that message right there, Sherry, is what resonates with me. Instead of trying to be the best in the world, be the best for the world. I
Changes
think
everything,
that
doesn't
right
it?
there summarizes so much of what both of us try to do in our companies. And both of us really have as a core value for ourselves and our companies. So
Yes.
that is phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing that. If you had to leave our listeners with one tip that they can walk away with, one thing that they can either reflect on or do immediately, what would that be?
Uh, I think that first of all, I've got two, if that's okay. One is going back to that idea of challenge. The greatest
Mhm.
one thing we can do is think about how can we plant and grow trust, because trust brings out the best in all that we have to offer. The second thing that I would say is, especially for people that are bringing in development or they're working on their own development, is if we want different results, we're going to have different rules. And
Mm.
recognizing that you are perfectly wired right now to create the results that you're currently creating. So if you want to create different results, you're going to have to create different rules. And rules are, when I'm talking about rules, where the real sustainable change happens is in evaluating your beliefs. And
Mm.
when we can get to what are the beliefs that are driving those actions, we are in a much better position to not only change results, but change results permanently. That's a really important message, because it's so easy to come in with templates and tools, and we do that and you do that, and it's great. But just know that that is only going to take you as far as you are really evaluating beliefs.
Love that. Sherry, thank you so much. How can people find you if they're interested in either getting a copy of your book or just finding you on social media? How can they do that?
So our website is yellingroup.com, YELLIN group.com. And the book is Unforgettable Leadership, 7 Principles for Leading, Learning, and Living, available on Amazon. And, my goodness, we're on LinkedIn and as Yelling Group as well. But this is truly our passion and always available to connect with people who just want to learn more. That's what it's about,
Mm.
right? The more that we can help people learn and grow in their respective areas, the greater the impact that we get to have for as long as we're here. So I would love for
Yeah,
anyone to reach out.
great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And listeners, thank you for taking some time to hear a little bit more about Sherry and really dive deeper into the conversation of brain based leadership. And as we listen to the 7 core principles or the 7 foundational principles of brain based leadership in the acronym of CRANIUM, I'm sure that many of us, especially those who listen to us squared and follow what we do, there's a lot of similarities. Everything that we do in our lives needs to start with ourselves. Every single
Yeah.
component of how to make change is about what we can do first ourselves, looking in the mirror and taking those action steps. It is never too late to start. And as I often say, if not you, then who? And I am encouraging and inviting all of you to check out Sherry's work, check out some more of Us Squared's work, and ultimately just take a look in the mirror and ask yourself when you're going to start and what you're going to do, because that's what every single one of us needs to do in society. Thank you so much for being a part of this today, and I look forward to the next conversation.